Hey guys, Bowie here. This is things I learned with OG.S4's Puck in 707. In this game, he's against the bounty hunter, and obviously you have to be very careful with your courier, and because of this he waits a long time until he brings it. Ideally, you want to have vision of bounty hunter in another lane so that you're sure it's not going to be sniped. We can see him pushing the wave aggressively here, and even though he could take the ward, he actually refrains from doing so. Puck's not a hero that can be killed easily, so it's not like that ward gives Viper that much of an advantage. Also, his orb and tango are on cooldown. Instead of risking taking some bounty hunter damage or even Viper damage, he decided to wait and hit the ward with the tango later to regen twice. The problem though is that as soon as bounty shows up, pay attention how he brings the courier, but through the side he's 100% sure bounty hunter isn't, not allowing him to snipe the courier on the way back or in. Unfortunately though, he underestimated the harass from Viper and also misplayed, not being able to get his salve before dying. When S4 comes back, he gets the room D ward, but in kind of a greedy way. He went for it because Viper could deny the ward, but I feel like he could have gone for the other side. He could have just used the orb a little bit to the right so that he doesn't need to walk through the river again. The new Viper deals way more damage and slow with his orb, by the way. Viper played this perfectly. He cancels one of the attacks and takes a lot of S4's HP down, but he gives the call for NP to show up. The fact that his salve was not used when he died finally gets put to good use, and they go for the kill. Usually, you want to backpack your items, but with NP going in immediately, he would lose more mana than normal and could even die because he would have like less HP threshold. But this is a hard game. Viper is quite the hero right now. Even though S4 went for quite a conservative orb to help kill Bounty Hunter a little bit later, he gets chased down and dies. 30% slow for 3 seconds at level 3 really kills Puck here. When he comes back, he brings another salve. Pay attention to how much damage Viper deals. While you don't want to die to Viper, you want to get experience and less hits at the same time. So he goes for this greedy warning rift, and he pretty much survives because of the salve. So while he indeed spent a lot of gold, he's the same level as Viper and has pretty much the same amount of CS. A lot of players, they try to jungle too early when they're against a Viper, or they play ultra passive. And while that can work, being able to get as much CS and experience while not dying is something that separates okay players from great players. And don't get me wrong here, S4 didn't play this perfectly. I'm pretty sure he didn't play against a Viper in the mid lane right now, so it's kinda hard to really know how much S4 misplayed and how much this hero is different. I mean, we don't know how many games S4 played against this Viper, so maybe he was not used to that as well. But anyways, I'm a big fan of him buying bottle from the enemy secret shop, since it was delivering items for his safe lane that was pretty efficient, since he rotated jungle after level 5, while he also rotated to use the shrine, so he loses even less time, and farms faster since he has orb level 3. So I'm a big fan of the rotation overall. Also, since he kept tabs on lanes, he spots Viper TPing and immediately goes back to the lane and keeps farming. S4 dies a lot in this game, and the first big fight that happens is after this tier 1 siege. When core players die a lot in the early game, they tend to get in that farming survival mode, and sometimes that's fine, but Puck is not the greatest jungler, and it's clear that staying mid trying to defend against that Viper is also not easy. They do have a lot of pushing heroes with the Beastmaster Jakiro, which means that trying to go for towers with his team is probably the safest and also one of the best ways to get gold, since he will lure Viper back. It's not like Viper can trade towers faster than his team. Since he has that Invis rune, pay attention how aggressively he starts the fight here. With that jump, he isolates 2 Radiant heroes, and now he goes for the Invis rune to wait his cooldowns and initiating an optimal spot. He makes sure to orb towards a safer place, but the fight continues. In these situations, seeking the fog to buy time for the next orb cooldown is a great idea, and he survives because of it, especially because Bounty Hunter doesn't have track yet. Still, even though they lost a couple of heroes, his team took tower and he's getting closer to his veil without hindering his team. When he is bottom, pay attention how he stacks the large camp and uses his mana before getting the bounty rune. The way he aligns his orb is also perfect, because it deals the biggest amount of damage possible, and with that, his veil is completed. Puck has been popular for some time, but I feel like I need to explain veil. A lot of players, when they feel underfarmed in heroes like Puck and Enigma, they just rush Blink Dagger because they feel like they need to initiate. But more often than not, that's a mistake, especially if you're playing mid. In a game like this, if Puck gets Blink, not only he will explode every time he initiates, he will farm waves slower as well. Veil actually allows allows him to be useful in teamfights and dish damage, but at the same time be able to farm and not just like initiate and die. If you're off-lane puck and like you have pretty greedy cores, going straight for the blink dagger is fine, but as a mid puck you actually want to have farm, you want to have experience, or else this hero feels very underwhelming in the mid to late game. There's also a significant amount of physical damage in the enemy team and the armor always feels good. This is the fight that puts S4 back in this game. Beastmaster finds Bounty Hunter, and pay attention to S4's decision making. Dark Willow is showing top, and since Bounty Hunter is purged, he doesn't need to use his ult. As his orb is thrown, it reveals everyone, so he joins in, ults, and walks until he has the optimal position to silence. A lot of people just press all the buttons at the same time and they just disengage. In the end, Weaver survives, but they burst Viper, and I like that he engages from a completely different position than his team as the fight progresses. There's AoE stun from Rubik, Bugs, and if they all go together, they're all gonna suffer the effects of those spells. And he's not tracked, so by going through that path, he might get there unnoticed. Eventually, Weaver shows up, and even though he doesn't kill him, he forces a TP, and pay attention to the efficiency with the Veil drop. Only now after his team wins a fight, he gets back to farming the Blink Dagger, while always being efficient with his orbs, as I already stated. Again, we see nice courier efficiency coming from S4. While it's slightly dangerous to do that against Bounty Hunter, S4 uses the courier to bring his Blink Dagger from the side shop instead of the base. He's quite safe with it. He sends the courier through the trees. Since he did that, he gets Blink faster for the fight that's starting to unveil. He coils suboptimally to save Nature's Prophet, and he keeps buying time. Since he got that blink immediately, he can phase shift into blink here, not dying, holding tier 2. And what S4 does now is quite greedy, especially when you're having a bad puck game, but if you pay attention, as he pushes bottom, he spots the Lesbian Fairy, and he has vision of both Bounty and Weaver top, allowing him to dive Viper without vision here. He makes sure to orb towards high ground, since this is one of the routes that the enemy could take to get there. With vision from those heroes top still, they can get even more kills, but staying in the high ground is something underrated. One of the biggest mistakes low MMR players do, especially in this mid tier 2 Radiant, is asking to be initiated from multiple angles without having vision from that high ground or Radiant's high ground base and stuff like that. With the split push coming from Radiant, S4 decided to go Travels. They have enough damage for now, and there's also a lot of synergy for TPs in fights with Beastmaster puppies and Nature's Prophet babies. Since the fight starts bottom and S4 gets vision of Weaver, he prepares to kill the bug, but pay attention how he approaches it. First of all, he makes sure there's no vision of him, then he pings for the Nature's Prophet TP, and he actually blinks in before the TP procs, because Weaver could get vision of that. And that's an easy kill, in a way. That being said though, since Weaver had no buyback and his team was already pushing, this allows them to tackle 2 tier 3s at the same time, so that was a pretty good play even though he died. One common thing I see a lot of low MMR players do is try to imitate those crazy dives that pro players seem to be able to achieve seamlessly, only to fail miserably. In this clip, why can't S4 dive so deep with a lot of enemies alive? Like, that's a Viper, that's a tier 3. Well, let's go back a little bit. As S4 goes mid, you can see Rubik falling, enemies retreating with low HP, and also Weaver fighting top, which allows him to dive Viper like that for a long time, since all the enemies are busy doing other stuff. Here we see S4 creating space again for his team. He finds the courier while he's exploring the map, and he goes for quite a cute play. He throws the orb in the direction he wants to run before the courier dies, so that as the enemies notice him, he'll be further away than if he just orbed after the kill. He commits one mistake though. He was afraid of the Bramble Maze and phase shifts before his Blink Dagger would be ready, and he ends up dying. That bought a lot of time for his NP though, and even though he dies, he coils 3 heroes, while Radiant loses Barracks and Fortify. In regards to the items he went for, he went Kai Kaya, as well as the spell amplification talent and Veil. This build is quite interesting, especially if you go Dagon later. It's another item that allows Puck to scale in the late game that's cheaper than Ethereal Blade, and I'm talking about Kaya here. I feel like most of the time you want to get the faster Warning Rift, like silencing a Weaver is very important. In this game though, you also want to be faster, especially against track. This game feels more like a split push war than a 5 vs 5 team fight, so that's probably why he went for it. This way he can kill a creep wave with his 2 spells without ever using Veil, allowing him to always have Veil ready for teamfights. Radiant goes for Roshan, and pay attention what his high spell amplification build allows S4 to do. First, he has Vision of Weaver and Viper mid, so he goes for a deep dive to burst the wave, and as you can see, even without Veil, he can burst it. He just creates a ton of space and makes sure that Radiant will have a hard time grouping S5 and using that Aegis to actually get objectives. Since S4 went for this Linken's build, pay attention how he approaches the game and the late game teamfights. S4 gets initiated by Willow here, drops the coil on her, and pay attention how his decision making goes even further than the teamfight itself. As he joins top, he doesn't care about the bounty rune, he doesn't care about the teamfight that he just started. He just goes in to shove the lane, top as hard as possible while the fight happens. Only after that he goes for the bounty and then he just shoves mid. Since he still has no burst damage and coil was used, he's not the best in these small engagements. He has no burst or control with coil on cooldown. He just keeps shoving those lanes, his play top forces Glyph, a buyback, and eventually they just win the game because of sheer split pushing. Well guys, as of always, this video was sponsored by Pvgna. They are following this channel for a long time. They released Oracle, which is kind of a tool that allows you to compare yourself with other MMRs and see what you're doing wrong and what you're doing right. If you're interested in videos about 707, there's a lot of new content out there. Just use my link in the description and start your Pvgna subscription right now. I changed my stream schedule and it feels like a lot of people really don't know about it. I mean, if you want your replays analyzed, this is a great time to go watch it because there's not a lot of people watching, which means you can probably win the raffle and get your replays. Also, don't forget to drop your like, and that's it guys, have a nice day.